Hello, welcome back to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari, and today I'm going to tell you about all the books I read in June, which are a lot, so I don't know how long this video is going to be. Right, so my plan for this June wrap up is I'm going to be splitting the video into small sections. First, I'm going to go through the stats, so the ways that I read the book, be it a physical book, an audiobook, an ebook, or manga. I'm also going to be splitting the video into sections, so I'll go through my physical books first, and then my ebooks, and then my manga, because the manga series that I read this month was, well, they were all from the same series, so I just want to do one blanket discussion talking about the first book, and then leave it at that because I don't want to share any spoilers. So let's get on with some stats, shall we? In June, I read 33 books in total, which is insane. I don't think I'm ever going to be reading that much in a month ever again. Of those 33 books, 13 of them were physical books. There was one audiobook. There were 11 ebooks and 8 manga. So now those stats are out of the way, we should get into the books themselves. So the first physical book that I read in the month was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I really enjoyed the concept of this book. This book is about a girl called Nora. She doesn't like her life and she wants to move on. She's fully prepared to end her life. Before that process happens, she gets whisked away to this midnight library where she can go through all of her other lives that could have happened due to the choices that she made, and she goes through and sees how everything could have been different. I liked the concept. There was mental health representation, and if you enjoy sort of sci-fi fantasy sort of things, I would recommend. I've heard Matt Haig writes really good science fiction sort of books. I'd recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, it was good. The next physical book, or section of a physical book, that I read this month was The Trojan Woman by Euripides. In The Trojan Woman, the play focuses on the women who have been captured out of Troy. It's just happened after the city has been destroyed. So all the women are gathered and it's about them discovering what's going to happen to them. One of the things that stood out to me is there's actually a debate in here between Hecuba, the old queen of Troy, and Helen, who was the cause of the war in the first place. Helen is fighting for her life, essentially. She's trying to prove to her actual husband, Menelaus, that she deserves to be kept alive and taken prisoner instead of killed right off. I really enjoyed the play. I think Euripides writes women really well for an ancient writer, because let me tell you, there are some books where I'm just like, I think the representation in this book was pretty good, particularly for an ancient writer. If you like Greek mythology and you like the Trojan War and the stories around that, I would recommend Euripides' plays. The next physical book that I read in the month of June was Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. Now, this was one of my most highly anticipated books of the year. Unfortunately, I think my expectations are too high. So I gave this book 4 stars. The reason it lost the star, even though I thought I would like the premise and everything, in this book, when you get to about 25% of the way through, the author introduces a second point of view. I understand why she needed that second point of view, because it's important for the story, but it's very, very jarring. You're reading it and it's in Ariadne's point of view for the whole first section. You're just going with it. As soon as you hit the 25% mark, boom, there's another point of view. I think if it was done in the beginning, it would have been better, because I did enjoy the story. I do know most of the things that go on in this sort of stuff because I have read a lot of Greek myth. It was just really jarring for me. It sort of took me out of the book and I didn't like it as much. I think if Jennifer Saint made it clear that it was dual perspective from the beginning, granted, I don't think the second perspective that she added would have added much to the first section, but if she'd done like small chapters with it in, I wouldn't have been so jarred and I would have known what I was getting into. It's about Ariadne and the story of how Theseus defeats the Minotaur and Ariadne's life after she betrays her family. If you like Greek myth, I would pick it up, but just keep in mind that there are two perspectives and you have to get 25% of the way through before the second perspective is added. Just know that and you'll probably enjoy it a lot more than I did. 4 stars. The next physical book that I read in the month of June was Cinderella is Dead. Cinderella is Dead is a story that takes place in a world where the story of Cinderella happened and was real. This takes place 200 years after Cinderella's ball. In this world, when you reach 16, you're invited to a ball to find your future husband. Now, you have 3 chances to be chosen by a man of whatever age. They can turn up whenever they like. You get 3 chances to find someone to choose you. Our main character, Sophia, doesn't want that. She'd much rather go off with the girl she loves and live happily ever after away from this town. Sophia has been pushed to the edge of society. She just does not want to do anything. When Sophia runs away, she ends up meeting the last descendant of Cinderella. This book is a YA fantasy, so you've got rebellion and someone turning against the government or the monarchy in this case. This book is sapphic, so if you are looking for a sapphic recommendation, I would pick that up. I gave it 4 stars. It's a good book. The next physical book that I read in the month of June was Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This was my 3rd time rereading this book. What can I say? I love it. This book follows Danica Brown, who is a PhD student at a university in Nottingham. Dani is a bisexual woman, so there's bi representation in this book. She doesn't really want a relationship. She'd much rather be in a friends with benefit situation. While she's at this university, in the building she teaches, this guy, Zafir works at the security desk for this building. He is a hopeless romantic. He reads and listens to romance novels. He is an ex-pro rugby player. He has now retired and works as a security guard. He is also crushing on Dani, but Dani does not know that. What essentially happens and how these two end up together is that one day there's a fire alarm going off at the building and Dani doesn't make it outside. Zaf notices that she's missing and goes back into the building to find her. Once he finds her, he carries her out the way that's being displayed on the cover, and students at the university film them and they think they're dating. So they start fake dating to boost up Zafir's charity and the exposure that charity is getting, and stuff happens. Like, it's a good book. I gave it 5 stars. If you like adult romances, I would pick up the Brown Sisters series. The next book that I read was The 6 Wives of Henry VIII. One of my goals for 2021 is to read a non-fiction book every single month. This was the book I read in June. It's about Henry VIII's 6 wives. The stuff that I take away from it is that Henry VIII was just a guy who valued looks and appearances and wanted a son. Because who runs the country better than a man? Nobody. I picked this up because of the musical 6. I've been listening to that for a few years now, and I was interested in knowing the history behind some of the stuff that Henry VIII was about. The Tudors have always interested me, or the later Tudors, so Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. I've always been interested in that timeline of history. So this was an interesting book to pick up, and it was surprising how short the marriages actually were. Without Henry VIII, we would not have divorce, so there's that. And they talk about how the act of divorcing evolved. That's an interesting bit. This author doesn't really write well for people who don't know anything about it. If you like Henry VIII and you want to know more and you have a basic understanding, maybe pick it up. So this was a 3 stars for me. It's like, it was a book I read. I could have just watched a documentary to get the same thing. The next physical book I read in June was Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This is probably one of my new favourite fantasy series. I cannot wait for the sequel. I think it comes out at the end of this year. So this has the found family trope. So if you like that in books, I'd pick it up. In this book, we follow Tarisai. Tarisai has been raised in isolation, so kept separate from her mother, who is called the Lady. She doesn't actually have a name. And she's isolated and educated in this manner, so kept at an arm's distance so she doesn't form attachments to anyone. When Tarisai is of age, she gets sent off to the capital where she's brought before the prince. Tarisai is chosen to become one of the prince's council of 11. They're all connected with this ray, which allows them to communicate with each other and draw strength from each other. The only issue is that once Tarisai gets chosen by the prince, her mother orders her to kill him. So it's a high stakes book. The magic system in this is really, really interesting. It's one of the best magic systems, one of the most well thought out ones. I really enjoyed it. I think everyone should go pick it up. I gave Raybearer 5 stars. So the next book that I picked up in the month is technically the audiobook that I listened to, but I read these in tandem. So I picked up The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. The audiobook that was just released by Audible is narrated by Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum in the Lord of the Rings films. So there's that. The Hobbit is a children's classic. This is the story of Bilbo Baggins, and he gets recruited by a company of dwarves and Gandalf, and he goes towards the mountains to get the treasure back from the dwarves. This was really fun. It helped having the audiobook, because I think if I read it physically every night, like a chapter every night, it would be a bit tough. I enjoyed it. I gave this one, what was it? I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's a good book. I would recommend it. There's lots of singing in the audiobook. I think the audiobook is the way to go. Yeah, it was a good thing to have on in the background. The next book that I read in June was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This was the Late Night Book Club's choice book for June. I did read this at the beginning of the year. I read this in January and I loved it. This time I went through and I tabbed it. I loved it even more. This is a Iliad retelling. You follow Achilles and Patroclus, who is Achilles' close friend, some people would say. Other people say that they were lovers, which is also an interpretation. In this book, they are lovers. This book hit me in the feelings. It's an emotional experience and I love it. I gave it 5 stars. I love this book. I think Madeline Miller does a really good job. If you know the story of the Iliad, you know what happens going into it. I know the story of the Iliad, so going into this book, I knew what to expect, particularly at the end, but you also get a more in-depth view for the characters and their mannerisms when you read it. I just think it's a really good retelling. I love her writing. I think it's just beautiful. The next book I picked up was Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. I picked this up because JD Ray Reeves has talked about it before. In this book, you have Kellen, who is approaching the time that he's going to be tested to become a real magician. Unfortunately for him, his magic seems to have disappeared, so he has to figure out a way to pass these trials without it. Kellen has to decide whether or not he wants to go down this path of magic or if he wants to try a different route. This is a really good young adult book. I really enjoyed Sebastian de Castell's writing. It was really intriguing and I kept wanting to know what was going to happen. Also, it's incredibly floppy. Most of the books I have here are UK editions, so they're usually really thick. So it just made it easier for me to read in my hand. I'm looking forward to picking up the next book. I will when I can. Who knows when that will be? I'll have to wait for shipping because it takes forever to get things here. I gave that 5 stars. The next physical book I read was Loveless by Alice Oseman. Now, this is one of my favourite contemporaries. I've talked about this already before. This is about Georgia, and it's about her time during her first year at university. It's a book with asexual representation. It's a book about self-discovery and acceptance. It was really good. I would pick it up 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Rainbow Grey. This is a really fun middle grade book. I've also talked about it. It's got weather magic. It's about a girl who, like a few other people in her kingdom, doesn't have any magical abilities, and then she suddenly finds this stone that gives her the power of rainbows, and she becomes Rainbow Grey. It's very easy to read. I read it in an afternoon. It's a good middle grade book. If you're interested in middle grade, I would pick it up. Now on to the last physical book that I read this month. When Diplo Met Rishi. This book is beautiful. It's so much fun. It's about these 2 kids, Dimple, who is from a traditional Indian family and has been arranged to be married to Rishi, and it's about their journey into a relationship at this summer program that Dimple is interested in, and that Rishi has turned up to meet her for the first time. Rishi knows about the arranged marriage, Dimple does not, and it's all about how their relationship forms from there. This is a really cute contemporary book. I gave it 5 stars. I just love it. I'm looking forward to reading the next one in the series. Now on to all the ebooks. First ebook I read was You and Me on Vacation. This is Emily Henry's second adult romance novel. I read Beach Read in May, so I picked this up when it was released in June. And it's just really fun. So it's about friends to strangers to friends to lovers, that sort of trope, like the friends to lovers trope. It's about Poppy and Alex, who were best friends and used to go on holiday every summer together. It's about how they fell out as friends and how they came back together, because Poppy has realised that the last time she was actually happy was when she was on holiday with Alex, so she reconnects with him and they decide to go on one last holiday together. It's a good book. I would recommend picking it up. The next ebook I read was Ace of Spades. This book is amazing. Think of it as Get Out meets Gossip Girl. This takes place at a US high school. The 2 characters in Ace of Spades are the only 2 black kids at this school, and they are being targeted by a hate program and these people called aces. These aces are trying to ruin their chances at life. It's really, really nasty. Devon and Shamika have to team up to try and figure out what's going on and who's doing what. This is a thriller, so I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. It kept me on my toes. I did not expect where it would end up, and the connections, it was so good. Everyone needs to go pick it up. I'm going to go and find a physical copy because I like it so much. If you like thrillers, I'm really picky with my choice of thrillers, so the fact that I liked it says something. I loved the characters. They were so in-depth and they weren't all good. They weren't all like sparkling. It was really good. Anyway, moving on. The next ebook I picked up was a debut novel, Dare to Live, Dare to Love. In this book, both the leads are bi, so you have a bi man and a bi woman. This is another friends to strangers to friends to lovers book. The guy goes off to university in the UK, leaving his best friend alone in the city where they grew up. Their friendship sort of dies out due to this, but he comes back and they meet again. To be honest, I wanted to go out and buy pink trousers after that because the only thing I have that's pink are pink skirts, and now I want a pink pair of trousers, so I may go and find myself some of those. It was a fun book, nothing to blow you out of the water, not in my opinion. I think the writing was a bit odd at times. Some of the writing just didn't work for me. Fun characters, cute atmosphere. It didn't really like draw me in, but I digress. It was a fun book. I gave it, I think it's a low 4 stars. Yeah, it was a low 4 stars. Next book I picked up was Fix Her Up. Now this is about a baseball star who gets injured and is sent back to his hometown where he sort of needs a kick up the arse. And the girl in this book, Georgie, is the town's like clown, and she gives him this kick up the arse. They form a fake relationship, so he gets an opportunity, and she can prove to her family that she is an adult and she doesn't need to be treated like a child all the time. She's 23. God, she doesn't need to be treated like a child. There is quite a lot of smut in here. I would pick it up if you're interested in adult sports romance. The next ebook I read was Heartstopper. This is a story about 2 guys who meet at, I think it's in registration in their class. They meet there. One of them is out of the closet and is gay. That guy is Charlie. Nick, the other guy, is discovering his sexuality. He has liked girls in the past. He's never liked a guy, but now he thinks he likes Charlie. So it's about him coming to grips with that. It's just really adorable. Lots of people have talked about it. If you haven't read it yet, you should do it. Alice Oseman's a fantastic writer. She has great art as well. I would pick it up. It's really heartwarming. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read was From Lukov with Love. This was my first Mariana Zapata book, which was what a great book to start with. You have 2 figure skaters who are being forced to pair up to compete in this pair competition. The guy Lukov does not get on with the girl Jasmine. Jasmine hates his guts. She stands her ground. She's such a great character. I loved reading from her. Mariana Zapata writes really good slow burn romances, so the actual romance bit took forever, but it was so worth it. It's enemies to lovers, it's forced proximity, and slow burn. It was so good. If you like sports romance, if you like enemies to lovers, if you like sort of douchebaggy male characters, I would pick it up. It's so fun. It got 5 stars. I then picked up Mariana Zapata's debut novel, Lingus. In this book, the main character turns up at a porn convention with her best friends and meets this guy standing around while her best friend is in line to meet her favourite porn star. She really enjoys his company. She bumps into him for the rest of the day, and then later she discovers that he's actually a porn star. They maintain their friendship. He turns up at events and stuff, and she starts to fall for him. It's not as slow as From Lukov with Love. Also, Mariana Zapata writes decent smut scenes. Very good. Next ebook was Dear Aaron. This is about one of the couples that was actually in From Lukov with Love, so I knew where they would end up. This is about Ruby and Aaron. Aaron is in the military and Ruby gets paired up to write him letters and emails. So it's Mariana Zapata's epistolary novel. They start falling for each other through these letters, and it leads to them meeting up quite later on, like quite a fair bit later on in the book. It's just adorable. I love the main characters. They're just so sweet. This one got 5 stars from me. It's just beautiful. The next book that I got was my other 3-star read, and it was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. I just didn't really like it. I know lots of people really like this book, but it was not for me. Not for me at all. I didn't really like the guy. There is mentions of essay. It comes up on the first page. It's not talked about in the description or anything. So if you are triggered by essay or the R word, maybe skip this book. In this book, the guy needs to be tutored by this girl for his philosophy class because he's failing and he wants to be on the hockey team. Unfortunately, I don't really like the characters. They just were a bit nothing groundbreaking, 3 stars. The next book that I read was, spoiler alert, this book features a plus size main character, and she is a cosplayer. She also writes fan fiction for this fictional TV show that's in the book that's actually based off the Aeneid, which I have back there. The main male protagonist is actually one of the stars of this TV show, and he writes fan fiction and fixes where the TV show writers have gone off from the books. One day, the girl posts a photo of herself in cosplay of one of the characters on this show, and people being quite rude about her online and tagging the actor. So he goes in and he asks her on a date. She says yes, and it's about their relationship from there. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Trigger warnings, there is fat phobia in that book. The main male lead has dyslexia. It was a good book, a feel-good book for me. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I read was my last Mariana Zapata book of the month, and it was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. This is most people's favourite Mariana Zapata book. I enjoyed it. I think I liked From Lukov with Love more. She's his PA, and she quits, and he turns up at her doorstep asking for them to be in a fake marriage because his visa is about to run out and he wants to stay in the US. It was fun. It's forced proximity. It's like marriage of convenience. Good book. I gave it 5 stars. I still think I love From Lukov with Love more, but that's just me personally. My last ebook was Boyfriend Material. I've read Red, White and Royal Blue. I was getting similar vibes from Boyfriend Material. You have a guy who's in the public eye. He gets in the press, and they just seem to take bad photo after bad photo after bad photo. Yeah, they're just really nasty to him. And the company he works for wants him to have a good representation. Like, it wants to put his best foot forward, so they encourage him to get a fake boyfriend. This is where the other guy comes in. So he comes in, and they both work together to try and change this guy's image. It was fun. I gave it 4 stars. Nothing groundbreaking. It was a good book. Now, for the last bit of the video, I read 8 books in the fairy tale graphic novel series. I reread this just to refresh my memory at the beginning, and then I continued on because I have the first 6 volumes up on my top shelf that you can't see on my camera. This manga follows this girl Lucy. She is a wizard and wants to get into a magical guild so she can actually use her magic to earn money and go on jobs. One day she's walking around this port town called Hajion, and she bumps into Natsu and Happy. Now, Natsu is in Hajion looking for a dragon called Igneel, and they've heard a rumour that Igneel is in this port town, and an adventure starts from there. Lucy gets recruited to come back to this fairy tale, which is Natsu's guild, and it's all about the story from there. It's like young adult, I believe, and you have to remember that it is made for a Japanese market, so not the Western market. But it's just fun. So I read this one and then volumes 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 this month. Those were all the books that I read in June. I hope this video isn't long. I've been filming for for over 50 minutes now. I don't think I'm going to be reading this much in July. Probably not. I hope you liked the video. If you did like it, please give it a like and subscribe if you're interested in this sort of bookish content. Leave me a comment as to what your favourite book of June was if you read this month, or I don't know, maybe tell me a TV show or a movie that you liked if you don't read books. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!